Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners come to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth. With your hosts, financial and wealth-building experts, Christian Allen and Rod Zabriskie.
Welcome into another episode of the Money Insights Podcast. I'm Christian. He is Rod the Pod. Rod, what's up, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm really good. Other than this crazy sciatic nerve pain that's been like picking at me for the last few weeks, it started to flare up in Hawaii, and I've just been having like little flare-ups here and there. I went on a good walk, like an hour and a half walk this morning after I did the elliptical, and it just started flaring up, and it's been a problem ever since. But Rod, other than that, I'm feeling great. So any of you physicians out there that have guidance for me as it relates to my sciatica issue, I am open to suggestions. Okay, today, Rod, I have a big announcement. We have a big announcement, and it's kind of a re-announcement, but we'll just call it a big announcement. Big announcement. The Money Insights Virtual Summit, I think we're calling it the Invest with Benefits Virtual Summit, is going to be on, Rod, say the date.
September 12th.
September 12th. So that means that anyone has plenty of time to kind of gear up and get ready for it. So as it gets closer, we'll have a lot of information coming out about it. We'll talk about a lot of the speakers. We feel like we have a really killer lineup of really dynamic speakers who have a huge amount of value to add to you as the listeners. And so it's going to be a big a come together of a lot of different communities that I think have a lot of value to add to one another. So anyway, there's going to be great speakers. We'll try to create opportunity for camaraderie, opportunities to meet people in other communities. And obviously by doing that, we all grow together. So keep that on your radar. That is September 12th. We're super excited. It'll be basically an all-day event. Okay, Rod. So today, Rod, we are going to be talking about the 5 key benefits. Now, when I say the 5 key benefits, I'm talking about the 5 key benefits in the Invest with Benefits. That's the benefits. Now, this might be confusing to someone if you're a regular listener and you're like, well, they already talked about the 6 key benefits. Well, here's the deal. This is a message that we're really excited about that we've been crafting and recrafting. So in this case, we're recrafting, and this is what's happening. This is what's happened. We kind of realized that we were stretching it by calling those principles benefits. Like there was benefits that come as a result of, but that's not a benefit. So like it was feeling a little awkward, even though we love those principles. So here's what's happening. We're getting things right. And those are absolutely our foundational principles: leverage, velocity, cash flow, asset protection, tax optimization, and estate maximization.
Yep.
Whew. Okay. So, but those are our key principles, but they aren't really the benefits, right? So today, what we're going to do is we're going to lay out what we would say are the actual key benefits to our whole Invest with Benefits philosophy, mantra. And so we're excited about that.
Yeah. And to clarify, we're hanging on to those. We're going to call those the 6 core principles.
Yes.
That are still valuable.
They're not going anywhere.
Yeah. They're still a part of the Invest with Benefits philosophy. This leverage isn't a benefit. It's a principle. We create benefits from that, but it's anyway. We were
to be fair, we always knew that, but like you go through this. Okay, so in business is funny, right? Like you go through these different eras of marketing, and like we've been, through different people that have supported and helped us to brand and market, and it's rarely just a, hey, this is it, and you just roll and you never change. Like more often, it's a little bit of a molding thing that's happening, and so like it's not that we didn't know that was like kind of stretching, but we liked the idea that we were really focusing on those principles, right? Okay, so to your point, we're keeping our 6 core principles. We're just going to add to it, I guess. Add to it, that's the best way to say it. These 5 critical and key benefits, which again are going to be the actual benefits that you get by utilizing the investment benefits philosophy. Okay, Rod, did I set the stage okay?
I think so, yeah. That sounds
Thank you for your help on that, by the way. Okay, so without further ado, Rod, let's jump into it. The first thing we were going to talk about, Rod, is number one, we're going to talk about producing higher returns, because that is the first key benefit. It's the one we talk about more than any other. Maybe tell us why. From your perspective.
The irony of it is that we often will talk about it in terms of the investment benefits philosophy does more than just improve your investment returns. Almost like we're breezing past it to move to these other things, taking it as a given. Oh, and the reason is because so much of what we see and hear in the financial world is focused and almost solely focused on getting a better return, right? You invest over here, you'll get a better return. You invest in this asset class to create a better return, et cetera, right?
Can I just say this, Rod? Keep your thought. This is important. When that's happening, it almost always includes taking on more risk.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. That's what it usually means. And I just want to clarify that, because when we're talking about this, producing higher returns, which again, we're not talking about that, which is really delineating it completely from the whole mantra. Because like you're saying, like we sometimes breeze over this, but it's not because it's not important to us, right? It is important, but we just don't do it the same way that other people are doing it necessarily. Right. Okay, keep going.
Right. Yeah, and that level of focus, everybody's talking about that and already thinking about that, right? So for us to say the investment benefits philosophy helps us produce higher investment returns, hopefully everybody hears that and says, well, gee, I hope so. Otherwise, it's not going to be valuable, right? But to your point, it's the way we get there, right? When we talk about these additional benefits help us to create higher returns. When we talk about the core principles, the 6 core principles, leverage helps us create higher investment returns without necessarily taking on more risk. So just wanted to kind of really clarify that part of it, because we absolutely are focused on it. But if you ever hear us breezing past it, it's because in some ways we take it as a given, right? Like we're all searching for better returns.
Yeah, and I think it's twofold, right? So there's two things, at least two, but I'm going to focus on these two just for the moment. First, we focus on the higher returns by utilizing the investment optimizer strategy.
Sure.
And in addition to that, we focus on generating higher returns by learning to invest in the alternative investment space, where I have more opportunities, more options available to me, which don't always include more risk. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, right? I can choose that. But by doing both those things, now what makes this things really unique here is that the investment optimizer, utilizing that strategy, does not increase anybody's risk in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I would argue that, and we're going to actually talk about this in the virtual summit, I would argue that it's as foundational for a financial structure, it will create as strong of a financial foundation as you can possibly get. And think about it this way, right? You want your plan to be so solid that it works in any situation.
Yeah. Okay.
So let me ask this. How well does the situation work even if let's say that I'm 35 and I'm crushing it, I'm making $3, $4, $5 million a year, and I'm saving 20% of my income because I want to replace, my full income for my future retirement self.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm 5 years in and I've been awesome at saving, and let's say I become disabled, let's say that I die. Mm-hmm. Well, what happens? All of a sudden, my plan is completely blown up, right?
Yeah.
Unless I have the key foundational pieces in it. Well, what's unique and nice about the investment optimizer strategy is it creates the foundation of the life insurance, the death benefit that we don't focus on very much, while at the same time improving actual returns just by using the mathematical concept of running the policy through a place that's generating consistent returns, utilizing the concepts of leverage to, compound interest and simple interest, all the things that we always talk about. Those things come together. But again, I just want to emphasize, you do those and all it is a different flow of money. It is not an increase in leverage, right? Or risk or anything else. And so from that standpoint, it's just incredibly foundational. You with me,
Agreed.
Rod? Did it
Yeah.
all make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a great example inside of the invest with benefits philosophy. Earlier, you mentioned alternative investments, utilizing alternative investments in order to, yes, increase your investment returns. And again, we try to be really fair on this, because we're not, if someone says, well, I actually like investing in the stock market or options or day trading or whatever it is, hey, great. Wherever you feel like you want to invest, go for it. The biggest thing that we end up doing and that we see happen with people is going from a place where they think that the the stock market, traditional investing is the only place, to where their eyes are open and they say, oh, actually, there are a lot of different ways that I can invest. I may still choose to continue to have traditional investments, but if I can go and do other things, well, now that gives me a broader array of options that I can choose from. And yes, in those options, you are very likely to find ways to create higher investment returns than you would if you just stick with the market, especially if you're just in mutual funds or things like that, right?
And most people aren't exclusive to one or the other.
Yep.
That's important to realize. So it's almost always going to be some combination of the traditional and the alternative. And so to your point, our focus is maximizing both of those things, maximizing whatever components we have. How are we going to create the right efficiencies to ultimately produce higher returns? Okay, so the first key benefit to the Invest with Benefits philosophy is creating higher returns. Second one, Rod, is one you like to talk about, and I'm going to let you talk about it.
Okay.
Tell us how we optimize the cash flowing in and out of our investments through the Invest with Benefits philosophy.
Absolutely. So cash flow is obviously a big buzzword, a big way that we are able to measure our ability to move past in most cases, people think of moving past their job, right? Have the freedom to move on. Maybe you keep working, but you could stop whenever you wanted to, right? Now it's on your terms. So what the Invest with Benefits philosophy does, and some of the key, the strategies that we implement, is optimizing cash flow. And I would say in this case, it's probably mostly talking about the investment optimizer, right? In the ways that you just talked about. In other words, I'm going to invest in cash flowing assets anyway. When I'm doing that, if I can optimize, make the money flowing through it better, thereby increasing my returns, thereby giving me more liquidity, thereby giving me more growth on my money when it's between deals, all of these different ways that I capture that efficiency, then I'm just going to be better off than if I didn't use the investment optimizer, right? In this example.
Yep. I think it's very simple, very straightforward. And by the way, it could be more broad than just the investment optimizer, but that's generally what we're focusing, because of course, that is like the most effective way to bring money in and out of, especially cash flowing investments. So
Yeah.
if you're doing that, to your point, you're actually producing, that's a part of producing the higher returns that we get from key benefit one.
Well, let me give some additional ways that we do that. So again, going back to our 6 core principles, right? If I'm using the principles, well, if I'm using leverage, am I able to create higher amounts of cash flow coming off my investments? Absolutely, right? If I'm focused on this concept of velocity and again, just that efficiency of money, making sure that it's working for me always, ideally, does that improve my cash flows? Yes, it does. So yes, it's about the investment optimizer, and the investment optimizer helps us do all of those things. But there are additional things that we are doing above that in order to optimize that cash flow.
Okay, so key benefit one, producing higher investment returns. Key benefit two, optimizing the cash flowing in and out of investments. That brings us to key benefit number 3, which is maximizing retirement cash flows. And if you remember, the reason that we call this retirement cash flows is because we generally teach and believe in more of a cash flow quote unquote retirement methodology than an accumulation one, right? Where I just try to have as much money in a big, 401k as I can, and I take my income off of that. We would say replace income with multiple streams of income, and you find yourself in a more powerful position because you're creating the cash flow off of your assets and generating the return on the underlying asset. By doing that, you put yourself in a really comfortable, strong position, right? Yeah. Safe position.
Yep, absolutely.
So when we talk about maximizing retirement cash flow, we're really talking about this holistically. We can, however, boil it down into some really specific things. So I'll give a couple of examples. Actually, I'll give 3 examples. So the first one would be through the investment optimizer, what we call phase 2, right? Phase 2 for us is we've been using it to invest. We've created higher returns. We've done the things that we want to do in that phase, but maybe I'm starting to slow down. Maybe maybe I just want to use it as income in conjunction with the other things I'm doing. I have the opportunity to bring off tax-free income from the policy that I can, just create as a really efficient way to bring money, because again, it's tax-free. So not only am I not paying tax on that, it's not having a negative, or it's not having an increasing tax impact on the money that's circular, that's around it, right?
Yep.
Which again is as impactful in many situations as the fact that it's not taxable.
For sure.
Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely, because you create a tax plan, right? Again, especially in this context of retirement, you have income coming from cash flowing assets. You maybe have some traditional retirement accounts that you're taking money from. Those have tax consequences. And because you can take money from a tax-free place, it doesn't mess those other things up. It allows you to have additional, tools in the tool belt around that tax planning.
Okay, perfect. So I said I'd give 3 examples. The first one was phase 2 in the investment optimizer. The second one is Capital Avalanche, right? Where we're utilizing leverage to produce and maximize tax-free returns at some future point in time. And we won't get into the concept, but really just like, I genuinely believe I consistently look around in the financial world to see like, what are the most impactful, powerful ways to create income? And I just can't find a more impactful way to do it. So from that perspective, like there's no question that specific strategy actually does that. But again, both of those strategies do it. And I have another one. Okay. We don't get into like, creating retirement income off of them. Actually, I shouldn't say that. We kind of did. Like just recently in a pod, we talked about utilizing the combination of life insurance and traditional market assets or annuities and life insurance. Yeah. But anyway, I was going to give another example is just if I were to use the market or annuities, the same principles apply. We want to make sure that we create the most efficient retirement cash flow possible. And so the question then is, how do we bring those things together in order to do that? And most often what you'll find is by utilizing a conglomerate, maybe 1 or 2 or more of these strategies, that's ultimately how I'm achieving that third benefit, which is again to maximize retirement cash flow.
Yeah. And in those 3 examples you gave, we touched on it, but I want to just hit it head on now. And that is one of the ways that we maximize retirement cash flow is by creating basically the tax strategy that we want, right? One of our core principles is tax optimization. And we obviously try to do that in all of our investing. And in this case, what we want to do, and we got into a lot of detail on the earlier podcast that you mentioned, where we talked about diversity of tax in addition to diversity of assets and the way we normally talk about it. Because if I get to retirement and I have a mix of taxable, like fully taxable because it was a retirement account, it was pre-tax when it went in, partially taxable because it's maybe cash flow coming off of a real estate investment or something else like that, and tax-free, then I can maximize my retirement cash flow in the way that I optimize the combination of the tax treatment on those investments.
And it all comes together.
Yes.
Okay, Rod. So number 4, we're getting into tax savings, not just tax deferral, tell us about why, just talk about why that's such an important element, and in what ways, like what creates that benefit? How are we getting there? Talk about it.
Yeah. So if you've listened to us for a while, you may have heard us talk about the difference, right, between tax savings versus tax deferrals. So let me hit on that first. Here's a typical scenario. A business owner goes to file his taxes. The CPA says, hey, here's going to be your tax, due this year. Business owner topples over in shock at the big number that they're going to have to come up with to pay their taxes. And they say, what can we do? How can we avoid paying all this tax? And typically, in almost all cases, the CPA's response is, oh, well, you still have the opportunity. You can contribute to some sort of traditional retirement account, a SEP IRA, or something where we can put the money aside. Even though we're past December 31st, there are still opportunities for us to set this money aside and ease your tax burden. So you're still taking the same money, you're still putting it somewhere, but at least you get to put this portion of it in a place where it's your money, it's in your name, it's you save, quote unquote, save taxes, right? That's what they're saying. Well, the challenge is that's not really tax savings necessarily, right? You're not paying the tax today. You will pay the tax later when you take that money out in retirement and or when you pass it to your children. And the tax rate that gets paid might be different. In a lot of cases, it might be the same, right? So the actual tax that gets paid in the long run may not be any different by deferring those taxes, okay? So what we want to focus on is what are ways that we can actually create real tax savings. In other words, not just pushing it down to where someone's going to pay that tax later, but tax deductions, tax credits, other ways that I can make it so that not only am I not paying it now, I'm never going to pay it. It's a true tax savings.
And that's where alternative investing has such a big impact, or a unique impact or benefit that you don't typically get from those other.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the big draws. If you're a high income earner, like they don't have the natural built-in tax benefits inside of your, again, you're getting with your 401k, you're getting a deferral, but to your point, you may or may not actually be saving. And I think if you read the tea leaves, chances are you're more likely to not be saving on it than to be saving on it. Right.
Yeah.
Most people don't think about that, right? It's too hard in the moment. So it's just like, oh, I just do it. Now, I guess I'll say this, like saving something is always better than not. And so if the option is put it in your 401k or spend it, like putting in the 401k is a much better option, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people are just unaware that there's another step of better opportunity that comes in the form of genuine tax savings by investing in real assets that give permanent tax benefits.
Yeah. And another big category for that, I lobbed myself a softball here because I used a business owner in my example. Well,
you did.
If that business owner has tax professionals around him who can really help him do some planning, he or she can create some really amazing tax savings just by the way that they run their business. I mean, in some ways they're doing it anyway. Anytime a business owner or inside of the business, you spend any money that's deductible, that's a tax savings, right? Well, there are strategic ways that you can build things. And I'll give a direct kind of parallel to the traditional retirement account, because there are plans out there where you can be setting some money aside for retirement, kind of that same model, but create real tax savings by doing it, right? Just by being a little more creative than the traditional SEP or IRA, 401k kind of thing, doing some other things gives you real tax savings. So business owners have more opportunity than a W-2 employee would.
Business owners and alternative asset investors, and by the way, oftentimes those two coincide very well to then create the tax benefits we're wanting. And again, the focus is like part of this messaging is like, let's just open our eyes and realize what each strategy that I'm doing actually does for me.
Yeah.
right? Because again, too frequently people do it because they hear it. That's kind of herd mentality. I've just heard that I should put money in 401ks. I've heard qualified plans are the solution, and they are a solution.
Mm-hmm.
They just aren't necessarily the solution. And sometimes they're the best solution and sometimes they're not. That's what we want to be looking at. The opportunity to save taxes is key.
Yeah. And can I give a really quick example? So
You absolutely can.
And I'm going to use number 2 and number 4. So number 2, just as a reminder, was optimizing the cash flowing in and out of investments. And then number 4 is generating tax savings. And we often give the example in the investment optimizer presentations and conversations that we have of a cash flowing investment that its pro forma was showing 16.5% return, IRR, on money put in and then cash flow coming back out over the next 7 years. And when you add to that the tax, maximizing the tax, right, the tax savings, then you can actually turn that IRR from 16.5 to 30, almost doubling your return. Okay, so again, going back to number 1, increasing the returns. And then when you take the investment optimizer flow in there as well, then you turn that 16.5 into a 37% IRR.
It's insane, right?
Yeah.
And I think anybody hearing that would think, I could probably, do pretty well over time on a 37% internal rate of return. And again, we're not expecting that. We're not saying that's always going to be the case. But if every time I have a 10% return, I can increase it by creating those efficiencies that, again, didn't change the risk profile, right? It was just understanding how to utilize the tax benefits that naturally that come in conjunction with the actual investment. And again, it's even before that. It's being thoughtful enough to realize that those types of investments have the tax benefits connected to them, and then being able to utilize it. And of course, you take that efficiency up a notch when you run it through your policy, through the investment optimizer concept strategy. When that's happening, that's when you're bringing all the pieces together to literally create the very best return possible. So to your point, we're getting back up to number 1. Okay, so recapping, Rod, our first key benefit is producing higher investment returns. That's always where we're laser focused. We know that's what the people want, Rod. They want to create higher returns. And why? Because creating higher returns gets us to our goals a lot more quickly. So we're always going to be laser focused on that one. The second one is optimizing the cash flowing in and out of our investments. The third one, maximizing retirement cash flow. Number 4, we just talked about generating tax savings, not just tax deferral. And finally, Rod, we're bringing it all together. The goal of the entire Invest with Benefits philosophy is to ultimately build generational wealth. So if anyone listened to our virtual summit last year, this was our topic. It was called The Accelerated Path to Generational Wealth. And really the focus is on how do we bring all of the principles that we're utilizing here together in order to bring out like the most ideal, the optimized solution or the optimized outcome. And again, to our points before, like it's likely going to take using all of the things that we're talking about. And obviously we're hitting on a couple of key strategies, but there's a lot of other elements to strategic investing and into a person's investment philosophy that all has to come together. But if I focus on how do I create these 5 key benefits and I utilize the 6 core principles to do it, then without question, that's going to be the fastest path to create the generational wealth that I'm ultimately looking to create.
Yeah. And there are a couple of elements to this. First, let me say this. Initially, we had 4 key benefits, and it was the first 4 we just went through. But then ultimately, like Christian said, we've had this focus on, and it wasn't just last year, it was for years, we've had this focus on building generational wealth. And part of that comes from in the strategies that we use. So for example, let's talk about the investment optimizer again. We talk about all the value that we can create while we're investing, the phase 2, taking income off when we're in retirement. Well, guess what happens? When I die, this death benefit is going to pay out as well. And so I'm utilizing the policy. I'm teaching the next generation what I'm doing, how I'm investing, how I'm flowing that money through the policy to do it. And then I pass away, that money lands into my trust, and there are instructions there that the money is to be used to go buy new policies on my children and grandchildren so that they can continue to use the strategy, these invest with benefits, philosophy, core principles, all of it, so that it's not just the dollars, right? The wealth is encompassing the dollars, but it's also encompassing the culture, the philosophy behind it, so that the next generation knows what they're going to do, right? They're not going to blow it.
Yeah, and really it's about bringing together the correct investment principles that allow it to come full circle. And that's what happens. If we do if we focus on those things, like that's what happens. Things will work out, because at the end of the day, the principles are what are driving the results, right? Okay. Yeah. So Rod, this has been fun. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to share with the audience before I call it?
If it wasn't really clear, then I just want to take a step back. Going back to this again, invest with benefits is the umbrella over all of it. And we have the 6 core principles that we utilize that help us to gain and attain the 5 key benefits.
I love it, Rod. Thank you for piecing it together in case there was any confusion. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us today. And we hope to see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights Podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, please visit moneyinsights.net. The views and opinions expressed on the Money Insights Podcast are not intended to be individual financial, tax, or legal advice. Always consult with the appropriate advisor before making financial decisions. And if you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This will help others find the show and learn wealth-building strategies for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.